This lesson explains the drawing of two-color reverse yarn adding patterns. Reverse yarn adding pattern, hereinafter referred to as raya pattern. What is a raya pattern? The pattern is knitted by the machine with auto-running yarn feeder. There are two yarn feeders to knit at the same time. The yarn feeder can automatically switch the front and rear positions when knitting. Main yarn feeder goes ahead during knitting, represents the color of the front of the cloth. Sub yarn feeder in the back represents the color of the back of the cloth, so as to achieve a variety of patterns of cloth. This is the principle of reverse yarn adding. The next we are going to learn the drawing steps of the pattern of two-color reverse yarn adding. In flyknit design system, there are two ways to draw the pattern of reverse yarn adding. Step 1. Draw the knitting action in the pattern layer. You can export the pattern of the front or rear shape, or export a simple pattern with 200 stitches and 200 rows from the shape, like this. Ribbings can a little less. Choose cast off with waste yarn. Step 2. Draw the self-running yarn set layer. First, copy the part that needs to be drawn raya pattern into the self-running yarn set layer. Only color codes 1 and 2 can be drawn in the self-running yarn set layer. In the area of drawing 1, the main yarn feeder is the yarn set in first line of 217, yarn first, and knitting in front. The sub-yarn feeder is the one set in first line of 218 yarn second, knitting at the back. That part of drawing 2 is the opposite. The main yarn feeder is set in the first line of 218, and knits in the front. The sub-yarn feeder is set in the first line of 217, knits at the back. Next, import the picture of the pattern to be drawn into the self-running yarn set layer. You can also draw it yourself. Choose the picture. Modify the new size. The picture size cannot be larger than the pattern size. Adjustment. Check the enable value convert, dividing into two colors. OK. Overlay it on top of the part you just copied. Change color. Only color codes 1 and 2 can be drawn in the self-running yarn set layer. This completes the second step. Step 3. Set yarn system 1 on function line 217, yarn feeder first. Set yarn system 1 on function line 218 yarn feeder second. Set as number 5 yarn feeder at 218. That is in this knitted pattern. The part of color 1 is knitted by number 3 yarn feeder with number 5 yarn feeder. The part of color 2 is knitted by number 5 yarn feeder with number 3 yarn feeder. This is step 3. Set the yarn feeder. Step 4. Compile. When compiling, pay attention to choosing the self-running model. That is, the model with the word ADF, such as ADF 3 systems 16 yarn feeders. Other model parameters are filled in according to the actual situation of the machine. OK. The main sub-yarn change has two modes: multi-system, single system. Single system change mode is more efficient, but is less effective. The effect of multiple systems change is better. Therefore, it is recommended that you choose the multi-system change. The number input box behind refers to the number of interval needles when the single system change mode is selected. Because usually choose multi-system, so this setting can be ignored. OK. Open Edit to view the action of the machine. The switch of the main and sub-yarn feeder can be displayed here. For example, in this row, the carriage is from left to right. System 1 knitting with yarn feeders 5 and 3. The red one is the main yarn, walking in front here. The blue one is the sub-yarn walks in the back. That is, when knitting this row, yarn feeder 5 walks in the front and 3 walks behind. Then the part of knitting the middle flower is that number 3 yarn feeder walks in the front and 5 walks in the back. This is the first drawing method. The second drawing method does not need to use the self-running yarn set layer, done directly in the intarsia layer. Step 1. Draw the knitting action in the pattern layer. Step 2. Draw the intarsia layer. Copy the part that needs to be drawn reverse yarn adding pattern into the intarsia layer. Import images in the intarsia layer. Change color. The color in the intarsia layer represents the yarn feeder or the knitting area of yarn feeder. Then let's use numbers 3 and 5. Step 3. Set the knitting form in the function line 216, marking the normal yarn of intarsia on the function line 216 of the row drawn on the intarsia layer 81, 1, and group yarn feeders at column 3 in function 216, yarn nozzle assembly system. Step 4. Set the yarn feeder. Yarn settings. In the first group of yarn feeder system settings, click Automatic 1. The intarsia layer shows the frontal pattern of the reverse yarn adding. That is to say, the cloth of the color 3 area is drawn on the intarsia layer to display the color of the number 3 yarn feeder. The cloth of the color 5 area is drawn should display the color of number 5 yarn feeder. Therefore, in the area with the color 3, main yarn is the number 3 yarn feeder, and sub yarn is the number 5 yarn feeder. On the contrary, in the area with the color 5, main yarn is the yarn feeder 5, and sub yarn is the yarn feeder 3. OK. Compile. Also need to choose the model with ADF. Choose the multi-system change. Edit. In the area where color 5 is drawn, number 5 yarn feeder in front, number 3 yarn feeder at the back. The yarn feeder in red is the main yarn feeder. The blue one is the sub yarn feeder. In the area where color 3 is drawn, number 3 yarn feeder in front, number 5 yarn feeder at the back. Here is the automatic kicking action of the self-running yarn feeder. This means that the system 1 is knitting from left to right with yarn feeders 5 and 3. When system 1 at stage 59, yarn feeder 5 automatically moves to the left of stage 57. When system 1 at stage 59, yarn feeder 3 automatically moves to the left of stage 57. That is, when the row is knitted, yarn feeders 5 and 3 automatically move to the left of stage 57 when system 1 is at the 59 pin, preparing for the next row of knitting. That's all for this lesson. Thank you.